And he also offers about 30 different clinics here in the US and 25 in Israel for removing skin lesions. And he leads humanitarian eco-treks throughout Nepal and foraging retreats in northern Wisconsin. And he has a bunch of different projects, some of which include an organic, raw vegan restaurant in Minneapolis, and a hypoallergenic, organic, gluten-free bakery in northern Wisconsin, as well as an eco-village and healing retreat that he has called Habitat for Humanimals. He's also involved in numerous nonprofits that he's begun, and one of my personal favorites is the one in Nepal called the Everest Learning Academy, where he has a network of schools, orphanages, daycare centers, and community outreach programs that educate, nurture, and protect thousands of disadvantaged children and orphans throughout the remote villages of Nepal that would otherwise be subjected to human trafficking, slavery, and prostitution. So he's definitely bringing a wonderful thing to our world in many ways. So without further ado, I introduce you Dr. Tel-Oren.
Good afternoon. Great to be here again. Every year or every other year. It's a great event with lots of nice booths and nice people convening together to celebrate the earth and what it has to offer us with abundance. And we all want to enjoy this abundance in a way that will protect our health. In a way that will protect the environment as well, and the ecosystem. Yes. Unfortunately, many vegetarians and vegans don't obtain the optimum health they deserve. Many flesh eaters and people on the paleo-diet tend to use that against the vegetarian and vegans, saying, look, I know so many vegetarians and vegans and they're not that healthy. And we know about some people who tried veganism or vegetarianism and then went to a paleo diet and suddenly felt better and used that for the rest of their lives as a new guiding force in the diet that they have chosen. What do we say to those people? What do we tell ourselves if we want to be honest with ourselves about how we should eat so that we do not suffer like so many of our brothers and sisters who do suffer despite their greatest efforts to achieve optimal health on a plant-based diet or 99% plant-based diet. We are here to discuss the health ramification of what we eat, regardless of vegetarianism or omnivorism. We're not here to come with a religious flag and fervor, because that does not attract omnivores. They want to know the simple facts, the science about nutrition and health. That convinces people more than anything if they haven't been convinced yet by the moral aspect of vegetarianism, if they haven't been convinced yet by the suffering of animals in commercial animal factories and farms, then we need to convince people on the basis of health, because that's the hardest argument to confront. A person who says, I tried that, I felt horrible, now I eat meat, I'm on the paleo diet and I feel great. What do you say to that? Well, today you will learn what to say to that, if you stick with me. So, let's go back to the old discussion about protein, which we started 2 years ago in the same event. It has been watched already by 70,000 Americans on YouTube. That discussion failed to enter the realm of antigenicity. Now this is a complicated word, antigenicity. And I'd like you to all say it once with me. Antigenicity, together. Antigenicity. Very good. It refers to the quality of being an antigen. If you are an antigen, you have forced your own immune system to create an antibody. Whenever you have an antigen, you have an antibody that has been formed against it by our own immune system. We need to look at the antigenicity of foods to realize what has happened in the last 50 to 100 years here in America that has altered our food to the point of no return, almost. Has changed the molecular structure of the proteins in our diet to the point that where we increase the content of protein in our diet, if it is a complex protein, we will react to it increasingly in a severe manner, more than ever before, because of our altered immune system and our altered food. That is a bad combination. Altered immune system and altered food. And this comes to the root of the issue of protein. All antigens in our diet are proteins. Everything you are allergic to in your diet is proteinaceous. If you're allergic to soy, it's because of the soy protein. If you're allergic to corn, it's because of the gluten, the storage protein of corn. If you're reacting against garbanzo beans, it's because of the protein in garbanzo beans. The same is true for sesame, which has become increasingly antigenic in populations that eat a lot of sesame. Does that seem familiar? Don't most vegans and vegetarians, as soon as they stop eating flesh, they are looking for the substitutes and they eat a huge amount of hummus and tahini every day? Sesame becomes a major force in our diet. And we wonder, what happens to the immune system when it gets exposed again and again and again to the same proteins, especially today when we live in a monocultural society when it comes to farming and agriculture. Almost everybody repeats the same proteins every day, whether they be soy or corn or wheat, or in cases of dairy eaters, milk proteins. Every time we eat those proteins and we repeat eating them again and again, we increase the chance that our immune system will start reacting. And today, and in the last 50 years, that chance is greater than ever. Let's explore why. Why is our immune system more likely to develop a reaction today more than ever before? And how does it affect our diet, and how does it affect our health? And why is it so important to vegetarians and vegans to know about this, as well as to omnivores? They should know that as well, because they are also truth seekers. They should be respected for being thinking individuals, thinking human beings, instead of being derided. There are people who deserve to know the truth, because oftentimes they are being misled also. And we need to explain to them where they make an error in their thinking in a logical and scientific manner, so they don't start proselytizing everybody into their own way, simply because they felt better on their own diet. They have a right to know the truth. So what is it in our environment that has altered our immune system to the point of great reactivity to the antigens in our food? One thing is that we are excessively exposed to the same proteins every day. As we said earlier, the monocultural diet. Another one is that in our food today we have a lot of hormones and toxins that stimulate the immune system in the gut. And most of your immune system is in your digestive system. Most of the immune reactions are in your gut. So, if you poison your gut with hormones and toxins in your food, that's where the immune system will be the strongest. And that's where the antigenicity of your food will be created. Another thing is the water we drink. It contains chlorine for a long time. And now with fluoridation, we have even further poisoning of our water supply, which affects our intestinal health and creates an immune stimulation. Heavy metals in our diet, in our amalgam fillings, which are continuously emitting mercury poison into our saliva, and we swallow that poison. That affects the microflora in our digestive system and creates an inflammatory response and triggers our immune system to manufacture antibodies more rapidly. Mercury and other heavy metals are frequently used in vaccinations as adjuvants to stimulate antibody response, so that our immune system will become strongly reacting to whatever comes with those adjuvants. But if we get mercury in our fish, and people eat a lot of fish today, plus the amalgam fillings, that mercury will affect your immune system within your digestive tract. In addition, we are eating proteins that don't look at all like the proteins of long ago. For example, people eat wheat that has been so hybridized in the last decades that it doesn't look at all molecularly to the wheat of 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. This wheat today is so abnormal that the immune system more readily recognizes it as foreign. Especially the gluten that is within that wheat. That is the storage protein of wheat and other grains from the wheat family. In wheat specifically, it has been altered so much that it has become a major antigen affecting 50% or more of American people. 50% or more. In this audience, we see people who care about health, usually because they have been searching for health after losing it. If you have lost your health, there's a much better chance that you are gluten sensitive than people who have not lost it. So in this audience, it's very likely that more than 50%, maybe 70 or 80% of you are sensitive to gluten. The same is happening with other common foods that are highly proteinaceous. For example, soy. Soy has been severely altered by genetic modification. Genetic engineering has altered the molecular structure of soy proteins. And that creates severe antigenicity in anybody who is exposed to that soy on a regular basis. Even if it's organic and claiming to be GMO-free, there's no guarantee because of cross-pollination. And most people who eat soy regularly, even if it's organic, once in a while, they will allow themselves to eat non-organic tofu, non-organic tempeh, or miso, or tamari, or namashoyu, or other sources of soy that occur in different sauces and garnishes and Chinese food. Some people, in fact, everything they eat has to taste Chinese. So they add everything to it all the time that comes from soy. And even if it's fermented soy, it still has some of those proteinaceous molecules that came from the soy. No wonder some people become extremely reactive to this highly antigenic protein in soy. Other people eat eggs every day. In processed food, in bread, especially in food that are made for gluten-sensitive individuals, you see a lot of commercial eggs which are so toxic. Commercial eggs, nobody should take. Even omnivores should not eat commercial eggs because they're so toxic. So we develop significant immune reaction to these most common protein that are everywhere. Corn protein is almost in all of our processed foods, in cornstarch and in corn syrup. And again, unfortunately, those people who are more sensitive than average are the ones suffering most, because it is so easy to sell to unsuspecting parents who have a child with gluten sensitivity or celiac. It is so easy to sell them a packaged food that says on it, free of gluten and maybe dairy. And now they're happy, and they don't know what's really in there. So much junk food, commercial eggs, high fructose corn syrup, GMO soy or corn, various refined flours and sugars, rancid fats and oils, GMO oils like cottonseed and canola. And all that is in the packaged food that goes to the sensitive people in our society. What do you think is going to happen to those people? They will start developing greater and greater sensitivities to a greater number of foods that they're exposed to every day. What else makes us more susceptible? How we treat our children. We have babies here in the audience. And those babies are just starting their lives, and they are supposed to mature their immune system in the next 10 to 20 years. But what are we doing to them? We're keeping their environment so sterile, so clean. Studies have shown that the more sterile the environment the child grows into, the higher the likelihood of immature immune system that ends up far more reactive, far more allergic to foods and toxins and airborne items, molecules that end up antigenic. So they make more and more antibodies. That's why we started all with, when we were 5 years old or 2 years old, when we were babies and children, our parents, if they kept us too clean, if they made us stay away from other animals and other plants and earth and dust, they forced our immune system to never mature appropriately. And therefore we have a higher tendency towards allergies, inflammation, diabetes, obesity, and even cancer and autoimmune disease. So children should not be kept in sterile environment. But it's too late for most of us. Most of us have been kept in sterile environment, and as a result, today we suffer. What about vaccination? Everybody gets vaccinated today. That changes your immune system's balance for the rest of your life. It increases the chances that you will make antibodies instead of having a strong cellular immunity. Again, that reduces the cellular immune response, so you have increased risk of cancer, while also having an increased risk of autoimmune disease and allergies and sensitivities. So all of those reasons combined together with drugs, medical drugs that we get all our lives, antibiotics. What do you think antibiotics do to our digestive microflora, which is so important to hold our immune system at bay? Without appropriate balance in the ecosystem within our gut, we are going to inevitably develop far greater inflammatory responses than ever before. And the immune system goes haywire in the gut. So antibiotics that are given to our children in large amounts, most of the time unnecessary, also in adults, and agricultural antibiotics are no less damaging, because almost every time you eat food that has been exposed to antibiotics, especially animal-type foods, especially animal products, those are definitely going to contain antibiotics that affect us. Not just the hormones that the animals manufacture as a part of their daily cycle, which also increases the damage to the immune system of our own digestive tract. So antibiotics, and what about other drugs that affect our digestive system? And what about antacids? A lot of people today are taking drugs that inhibit acid production in the stomach. That also translates to an inappropriate behavior of the digestive system, leading to inflammation and to inappropriate immune response. So you have enough reasons to see why in the last 50 years society has become highly susceptible to food antigens. And as the food has been changed to greater GMOs, greater foreign molecules, and people are eating milk products all the time, whey protein and other forms of animal-based protein. Milk protein, whether it comes in yogurt or in cheese or in the white fluid, is foreign to our genetics. It comes from a foreign animal. There's a good chance, especially with repeated exposure, that our immune system will react. Therefore, the 4 highest reactive antigenic proteins in our diet are gluten protein, milk protein, that's the casein, egg protein, that's ovalbumin, and soy protein. Those are the most common antigens in our diet. Notice that 2 of them are vegan. Soy and gluten are both vegan. Do you know how many vegetarian and vegan restaurants offer you seitan, which is gluten protein? Seitan? I call it Satan. And do you know how many vegan restaurants offer you huge varieties of soy protein to give you the same feeling and taste and texture of the flesh that you once loved? Do you think you're going to be healthy if you belong to the 50% of the population that react to gluten? Of course you will not be healthy if you increase that quantity to compensate for losing the flesh in your diet and the dairy and the eggs. And that is what happens to a lot of vegetarian and vegan as they increase those antigenic proteins in their diet instead of thinking about nature and understanding that in nature you would not be exposed to the same complex proteins on a regular basis. All of those seed proteins as in grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, are complex proteins. Just like meat is a complex protein. Like dairy and eggs are complex protein-containing foods. If you avoid one complex protein and you start eating a lot more of another, what do you think will happen? You will start having a reaction. And in some of us, genetically, there is a built-in immunological mechanism to turn gluten into our worst nightmare. Those people will never feel good on a vegan diet if they allow themselves to be exposed to gluten every day. And they don't know that they're sensitive when they start having the reactions to gluten. What are those reactions? They affect every fiber of your being. They affect your brain, causing inflammation in the brain, behavioral disorders, learning disorders, and psychiatric disorders. It's been proven in numerous scientific studies that if you eliminate the food that is your antigen, severe psychiatric conditions can be eliminated. Even ones that are normally resorting to severe psychiatric drugs for life could sometimes be eliminated instantly as soon as you avoid the antigenic protein that affects you individually and not someone else who is affected by other protein antigenicities. Each one of us is a little different in what we react to because of our genetics, our history, our medical drugs that we have used in the past, the history of sterility in our environment and excessive cleanliness, whether or not you were exposed to those proteins during immunological storms, as in when you're sick. You're sick and you don't feel like eating. You remember that moment of being sick and not feeling like having anything complex in your diet for a day or 2 or 3? That's because you are manufacturing huge amount of antibodies in that moment. And your body does not want to be exposed to complex proteins at that time, lest you will form a reaction against those proteins for the rest of your life. So when you're sick and your body doesn't want to eat, listen to it. Don't force it. Don't do the chicken soup. Because the chicken soup contains those complex proteins. And even though it's easy for you to have, and maybe it will accelerate your healing, it will lead to a reaction against chicken for one thing, because you've been exposed to it during an immunological storm, but also against other complex foods that you have eaten at the same time. And that's a very important concept to realize. Whenever you eat a food that you react against, you form an inflammatory reaction in your digestive system. That inflammatory reaction creates a leaky gut. That leaky gut allows undigested proteins to enter the circulation and mount an immune reaction against them. That's why whenever you have an inflammation in your gut, you tend to develop more reactions against greater number of proteinaceous foods that you happen to eat at that time. Most of us have numerous reasons for inflammation in the gut. And most of us are eating those complex proteins at the same time. That's why, if you are reacting against gluten, if you belong to the 70 or 80% of you who react to gluten, and 50% in the general population, if you belong to those 70 or 80% in this group here in this auditorium, there is about 40 to 50% chance that you also are reacting against gluten of oats. And you think that those Quaker oats are innocent, and that gluten-free, guaranteed oats are fine for you. But they are not if you react to gluten of wheat. Over 40% of the people will also react against the gluten of oats, rolled oats, Quaker, etc. And many people who are reacting against gluten of wheat will also react against the protein in soy and corn. And of course the animal products that people still eat quite a lot of and regularly. So you have to be aware of that and start varying your diet. Change your diet. Start rotating it. Don't allow yourself to fall in the trap of buying processed food that determines for you what are the ingredients. You determine the ingredients from now on. You buy the wholesome food and prepare it yourself, or have somebody prepare it for you. So that you are eating every day a different form of gluten-free grain. Every day a different form of legume. While avoiding the ones that you react against. And then you suddenly develop such amazing improvement in your health that you wonder why nobody told you that before. If the gluten leads to psychiatric disorders, and to immunological suppression, and to hormonal imbalances and damage to your pancreas or to your thyroid, just like dairy products can cause diabetes type 1 by affecting an autoimmune attack against our pancreas, gluten can affect an attack against our thyroid gland. And most people today suffer from autoimmune diseases, of which thyroid autoimmunity is the most common. Gluten is responsible for at least 50% of those people. And maybe dairy in others, and maybe soy in yet others. You have to start measuring those antibodies and find out what you're reacting against. Instead of just saying, I'm on the paleo diet. Why are those people feeling better when they went paleo? Not because they increased the amount of flesh in their diet as they think. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. You cannot improve your health dramatically, symptomatology speaking, right? Clinically speaking. You cannot improve your health so dramatically by just adding foods to your diet. It takes a long, long time to change your health by adding things. But it takes a few days to a few weeks to improve your health by eliminating things from your diet. So why are those people who go paleo feel instantly better? Not because of what they added to their diet, but because of what they left out. I've seen so many stories of people who claimed how much they suffered on a vegan diet, and then they went paleo and instantly felt better and started riding the bicycle after being paralyzed. Well, that's the nervous system. And one of the main effects of gluten sensitivity is direct damage to your nervous system. In some cases it can be severe. Just like a severe damage to the hormonal system, the psychiatric system. And many people suffer in their skin, they have eczema, they have acne. Many in their respiratory tract, they have asthma, they have sinusitis chronically. All of those symptoms can be instantly improved if you just avoid that antigenic protein that affects you. So if those people avoided gluten, they could have suddenly felt so much better, even if they stayed vegan. But they don't know it. They simply adapted an entire diet with everything that it claims to be true within it. They did not discern between the different components of that diet to see which portion of it helped them and which portion of it actually harms them in the long run. I see a lot of those people after 3, 4, or 5 years from going paleo, or any other diet similar to paleo, where they eat a huge amount of animal flesh and animal products, with all of their proteins, which are also measurable in their quantity of antibodies our body manufactures against them. And those people, after 3 to 5 years of eating 4 to 6 times a week and sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, they eat animal products. They end up within several years having either cancer or diabetes, or they start gaining in weight uncontrollably, or they have autoimmune disease or inflammation and they start having general Malayan fatigue. They don't express optimal health anymore, but they just remember how much better they felt when they started that diet, not realizing it was simply because they eliminated gluten or soy or some other antigenic protein that they've been exposed to. Sometimes even our children, when they go on a gluten-free diet and they start buying all those processed gluten-free foods, all those cardboard breads that feel and taste like rubber, but they're gluten-free. And they initially feel better, but soon enough, a few months later or a couple of years, they start having symptoms again because of the ingredients in those substitutes, because of the high fructose corn syrup and the soy and the eggs and the dairy and other proteinaceous food that are in there, and the GMO product. Those are children that are already susceptible. They already have a tendency toward inflammation, so they will start developing new reaction, and their parents will think, oh gosh, we must have exposed them to even more gluten unknowingly. But it had nothing to do with the gluten. They just keep blaming the gluten. They join all those gluten-free associations, those celiac groups, and they want to believe that gluten is the #1 enemy of the world. And they forget that there are other potential enemies that they are exposed to every day, and that they are ruining the health of their children by those cheap substitutes that are not worthy of the title food. And they wonder why those children get sicker and sicker and not healthier, despite the elimination of gluten. So I'm not saying that gluten is bad for everyone, but it's bad for so many of us that we must think about it. And if you're going to be healthy vegan, you have to observe some basic rules so that you can represent vegetarianism or veganism with respect. So that people would see you and think, wow, not all vegans look sickly. Like you have heard so many people say that. Well, it's about time that you claim the truth and be responsible. Both nutritionally, you might be deficient in something. You know, even people who are not vegan and vegetarian are deficient in some things. Everybody could be deficient today. Don't feel like the fact that you're a vegan or vegetarian should mean that you are not deficient, period. Because that would end up harming the image that you vegetarians, that we vegans want to convey to the public. If you are deficient in something, make sure you are not. Regardless, because a lot of the supplements sold out there are not sold to vegetarians and vegans. They're sold to people who eat dairy and meat and chicken and tuna and beef and pork. They take supplements, why shouldn't you? Even out the playing field here. This is not a war, it's about education. Education can only be won upon the truth. The scientific truth and the understanding of your body's physiology and how it responds to different triggers in its environment and its in food. And we need to start getting responsible about it and realize what the real answers are to give those people who will challenge you every day. It says basically, who has the best education? And today in our environment, when I test people who eat animal products regularly, I see that they react to the animal products that they eat regularly. And they might respond to the gluten in addition to that, and to the corn to boot. So they have to avoid those things, so should we. Everybody can be reactive. You have a history. You used to eat dairy products every day. What do you expect? All those athletes who eat excessive amounts of protein, you think they're going to be spared? About 10 to 20% of the people that I test are sensitive to rice. Yes. Not because rice is evil, it's not. But because those who avoided gluten are eating rice every day. What do you expect? It has its own storage protein that you might react against over time. Most people don't react to rice yet. But if you start making that your main staple food, that mono diet of rice, almost every meal, you have a higher and higher chance of increasing your immune system reaction. And that reaction always starts in the gut, where you make specific antibodies called IgA antibodies. Now you go to a typical doctor and you say, I want your blood, I want you to test my blood. Yeah, I want your blood. You see, maybe that reflects on me and how I feel about most doctors. So I apologize. So you offer your arm in submission. And you say, I want you to take my blood and measure the antibodies against gluten. What am I reacting against? And the doctor will look for IgA antibodies in your blood. You think that there's a good chance we will find those antibodies there? The chances are very slim. Because they are manufactured in your gut, in your digestive tube. That's where you make those antibodies. And very few of them will leak into your circulation and will be therefore found in your blood. Don't expect accuracy from those blood tests that are actually missing 90% of people with gluten sensitivity. 90% of you are being missed. If you only tested the correct medium, the correct specimen. Instead of blood, you should measure your poop's content of antibodies. Your poop is so important for your digestive analysis. Your poop will determine how many of those antibodies have been formed, because that's where they will be found. That's where the main war between the antigens and antibodies take place. The antigens in your food. So measure the antibodies in your poop, not in your blood, and you will find that over 50% of you are sensitive to gluten, and 40% of those people will be sensitive to oat gluten, and about 10% will be sensitive to rice, and about 10 to 15 will be sensitive to sesame, and a large number, maybe 50% or so, will be sensitive to eggs if they eat eggs regularly, and to corn, and to soy. And many people will even start reacting to other complex protein that will shock you, like almonds. Raise your hand if you eat almonds every day. Raise your hand, be honest. Higher, higher. Okay, quite a lot of you eat almonds every day. Now raise your hand if you eat almonds 6 days a week. That should be more than before. Some of you did not raise the hand because they skip a day a week. That's not enough to skip. Almonds have proteins that are antigenic. If you want to reduce almonds' antigenicity, you have to avoid eating almonds every day and maybe have it only once a week or twice a week, and that's it. Most people don't do that. They're obsessed about the same food every day. Some of you will eat sesame every day, as we mentioned earlier. Some of you will eat walnuts every day, or other types of seeds. So we want to measure for the most commonly ingested proteins and find out to which ones you react, so that you can achieve your own individualized optimal health instead of guessing. If you're going to have to avoid wheat gluten for the rest of your life, don't you want to know for a fact that you are sensitive to it as opposed to guessing? It's a big commitment to avoid gluten. I'm sure that many booths in this festival contain gluten. It's vegan, so what? It contains gluten. I'm not telling you to eliminate gluten 100% unless you know that you are sensitive to it. And if you are sensitive, you have to avoid 100% and support other vegan products instead. And the vegan manufacturers will start paying attention. If people say to them, sorry, I cannot do this, this or that, give me some variety. Increase the amounts of gluten-free products in your food that are also wholesome. Avoid the GMOs, like the plague. Avoid the processed foods. Avoid the hormone antibiotic-laden foods. Eat 100% organic. And if you start doing that, the manufacturers will pay attention. Even if it's vegan, it will be healthy vegan instead of junk vegan food. Enough of eating junk food, vegan or not vegan. If you stop eating vegan food, you'll be as healthy as vegans used to be 20 or 30 years ago, before the industry started making huge amounts of processed refined foods for us. Now we are so conveniently gravitating to those vegan shelves that have long shelf life foods on them, which only humans will be silly enough to eat them. Even bacteria are smarter than that. They don't want that food. It doesn't spoil for such a long time. What does it mean? And we eat it for our own convenience. And we wonder why it is that we are so unhealthy. Even meat products spoil faster. Therefore, they have to be more fresh. So, it's not just about vegetarianism or veganism and health. It's about common sense and observing what nature tells us is appropriate to eat and what is not appropriate. And it's about increasing the dosage in your diet of food that are less complex, more of the fresh leaves, more of the stems, the flowers, the roots, the bulbs, the fruit of each plant. Not just continuously and obsessively every day using the grains, the legumes, the nuts and seeds of the plant. And we tend to want to have the seeds all the time because they're so proteinaceous and calorically rich and fatty. And we eat a lot more of them to fill ourselves up, instead of eating more of the simple foods. And then a little bit of those seeds every day, as long as they are rotated, so that you don't eat the same seed every day, will be easier on your immune system, and your gut will not continuously react. And you will not be damaging your health like so many vegans and vegetarians do. And you can then teach the omnivores how they can be healthier too, by avoiding the antigenicity of the foods they eat. And if they test and they find out that just like they might react to gluten, because 50% of them also react to gluten, just like they can react to gluten, they may also react to chicken and to beef, because they eat those all the time. And when they see the results, black and white, based on their stool analysis of antibodies of IgA type, they will know that they need to make changes. And they might realize that when they felt bad on a vegan diet or vegetarian diet, it was simply because they ate foods that they reacted against, even if they were vegan. And that when they eliminated those foods, they felt better because of that elimination, not because they added flesh to their diet. So what is that test? That stool test. And I know that every time after a lecture, a lot of people come to me and ask me personal questions, and we don't have time for that. The important thing is, if you want to have a stool test, you can look it up online, or you can email my assistant, who would guide you in the right direction of where you can get a stool test that is designed for vegetarians, separate from omnivores. I designed a special panel for vegetarians, because I don't think vegetarians should be tested for stuff they never eat anyway. But out of respect to omnivores, I added a separate panel for the omnivores who still want to continue eating flesh, with the hope that if they test it, they might want to stop eating it. Another reason for them to go into a simpler diet that is more plant-based. Let them test and find out for real, instead of arguing in their face and making enemies out of them. They're still family members, they're still friends. They're still people you want to do business with and maybe sell something to or buy something from. They're people you might want to trek with in the Himalayas if you join me on a trek. They're people who are real people who truly want to find out what is good for their health, just like you do. So have them do the test, and if you want to find out how to get that test, both for omnivores separate from vegetarians, just email clinic@ecopolitan.com. Clinic@ecopolitan, as in ecological metropolitan or cosmopolitan, ecopolitan.com. And then you'll have easy access. You don't need a doctor. You don't need to have any referral for this test. You can just order it on your own. You can select the panels of your own choosing, so that you can find once and for all what foods you should avoid in order to increase your health dramatically and avoid all those symptoms of the skin, of the lungs, of the hormonal imbalances, of your psychiatric and neurological problems, of the immune suppression. All of those symptoms can be improved dramatically if you just avoid the foods that you react against. You, individual, different from others. No one diet for everybody. Some of us have to avoid soy more than others. But it's a good idea not to eat soy regularly anyway, because of the suspicion of GMO contamination and the complexity of it and the frequency within which we have been exposed to it. This is true for all those different foods that you have eaten every day that are probably available in all those powdered protein products that you have taken. I don't care if it's powder from rice or powder from other foods. There's a high risk that if you eat it every day, you'll be suffering pretty soon some level of antigenicity. So today you learn about antigenicity, about antibody formation, and about what is it that makes us feel instantly healthier. The avoidance of our antigenic food, our proteinaceous food, the foods that are far away from our own genetics, that our body will recognize as foreign, mostly from animal products, from dairy and from eggs, and food that are far away from what nature presented to us thousands of years ago, before severe hybridization and genetically modifying our food have taken place. That is the main reason for why we have lost our health, and also the main solution for how we can gain it back. And I wish all of you to gain your health back. Thanks very much. If you want some of my CDs and DVDs, there is a booth. There is also a salt there that's rich with sulfur, a salt that tastes like eggs, that has so much sulfur in it that is a functional food. It gives you sulfur for detoxification, and it supports the children of Nepal, the orphans, and children who otherwise would be sold for trafficking, prostitution, and slavery. That's the Nepali salt that serves the children and improves your health at the same time. All that is in that booth. Yellow, it's a yellow booth. You see a yellow booth, you know. Outside, yes. And that's where there are some CDs and DVDs on other topics that I lecture.
Okay.
All vaccines contain adjuvants, with no exception. The only reason that drug companies can keep supporting their vaccines is by showing antibody increase. They don't measure your immune system's response to those bacteria or viruses. They only measure the level of antibodies to justify using the vaccine as a drug for everybody. Right. No, actually today most people who develop polio have been vaccinated for it, by far. Look up the science. Yes. Beans is a big family of legumes. I mentioned legumes as a part of the seeds. Like soybean is a bean. But if you eat the same bean every day, you'll be in trouble. If you rotate them, like I said, one type of bean per day, no more than, say, 4 or 5 times a week, and keep rotating them so you're not repeating yourself, the chances are fairly good that you will not develop a problem. But if you already have developed a problem in the past, you need to know about it because you have to avoid that specific problem for a while. You can test that to find out instead of just guessing. And people make changes and they don't know what they're changing to. They start eating one food and they eat a lot more of another that they might be reacting against. If you have a thyroid autoimmune disease, in the vast majority of cases, it's gluten, but it could be others. Everybody should be tested for the antibodies against thyroid. I have a 2-hour lecture dedicated to thyroid. So you even, actually it's been recorded in the Bay Area just last week, so it's not available. No, that was not the thyroid. But if you email my assistant, she'll tell you the same email I gave you. It doesn't matter who she is, you have the email address. I told you, clinic@ecopoetin.com. My thoughts don't count for anything. Science counts. Science and nature. My opinion should never be the issue. Because then you start pitting opinions against opinion, you just get
Are you
confused.
recording everything?
Look at the science.
Oh, because
Is there
Dr.
any
C
science to
actually,
support
he was
the claims
recording it with the
made
camera,
in
but it looks like the battery
diet that
died
you
or
have mentioned?
something. So, is it possible to
There
get
is
a
no
copy
science
of
whatsoever.
your recording?
Does nature
On
tell
YouTube?
animals, zebras, or giraffes to eat according to
the name of
their
the
typing?
account?
Do they eat what's
Oh,
available?
okay. SFPS?
They
Okay.
eat just
Awesome.
what's available to them in nature. And they have a huge variety, and they don't segregate themselves based on blood type or metabolic type or other things like that. They just eat what's available, unless they damage themselves with it. Unless they change their food completely, and we need to avoid what's damaging us, which is based on what we have elected to do from our childhood until now. It is nothing to do with typing. And I don't want to get into greater discussion because I have a 2-hour discussion that refutes every aspect and every point on scientific basis. There is no science. And if anything, I could tell you about thousands of my own patients who did not fit. And if people don't fit, then it's not a system. A system should make you fit, but why should you fit? We're all individuals. We're all different. Why should you fit? It's too easy and too oversimplified to choose a diet based on just 4 types, 3 types. It's oversimplification, it's pseudoscience. It pretends to be science because you have heard of ABO blood groups. But if you heard about the other hundreds of thousands of genetic epitopes expressing themselves on the outside of our red blood cells, you'd realize that oversimplifying it to just 3 or 4 groups is a joke. I don't want people to think that because of where they come from, they know. Because nowadays we have mixed ourselves so much. We have been a major blender. You cannot say or look for that. You have to simply analyze what you are reacting against now and avoid it now. Whether it is for life or for a period of time of 4 months or 6 months until your immune system relaxes, that depends on what foods they are. That was one of the things I mentioned. I mentioned many things. Well, I'm sure that this lecture will be on YouTube and you'll be able to listen to it again and again and again. We're going to also put it on YouTube. Autism? Well, autism is a very complex situation and many things affect it. One of them is food sensitivity, which is one of them. Yes. 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 A lot of paleo people eat the same kind of high complex protein every day, only because gluten was far worse for them, and they eliminated gluten. So because many of them say no grains, 100%, so by doing that 50% of them will feel significantly better because 50% is sensitive to gluten. And others, 40% might be reacting to oats. They avoid oats, they feel even better. But if they keep doing that, after 3 to 5 years, like I said earlier, they will start having new reactions to the egg protein, because egg is one of the biggest antigens. So they will start having problems within 3 to 5 to 6 years or earlier, and most of them do, according to my clinical experience of working with them. Nobody has done studies about that, because it's a very new fad. It's in vogue, but it will be gone just like Atkins is gone. It's just a temporary craze towards health that is justified simply by the avoidance of these glutinous and other types of proteins. And if they simply avoided those and stayed vegan and ate a healthy, balanced diet, they probably would have felt even better than by going paleo and simply stopping the gluten while doing all the flesh and eggs. You're welcome. It's not easily available, and now you have it available. You're welcome. Any kind of digestive problems, regardless of the exact symptoms, any kind of digestive problems could come from a myriad come here to think about. If you understand the rule of thumbs, you will not ask me about yourself because you qualify under the same rules of thumb. Instead of telling me again and again your symptoms, it doesn't matter. I gave you digestive problems, neurological problems, psychiatric problems, immune problems, skin issues, respiratory problems, hormonal imbalance. All of those symptoms can easily fall under these types of issues. And if you want to know the truth, just test yourself. Okay? Just test yourself rather than focusing on the symptoms that you have. Because each one of you has a different constellation of symptoms. Just send an email through yourself or through your friend or through your child. Somebody in your family can send an email. There's a phone number. And if you send an email, you'll get the phone number. I told you don't need a doctor to test. Just email and you'll get the information. Ask for the stool antigen test. Ask for finding about food allergies or food sensitivities. Not allergies, sensitivities. And they will know. They're not